Welcome everyone. This is a recording of the demo that was held on the Internet 2 Technology Exchange conference. The demo is about leveraging IAM to manage Zoom licenses, and this is a result of the shared work of three partners: Cyrus Identity, Evolveum, and ProvisionIAM. I will start with the motivation for the demo, why we decided to do it. We are realizing that a lot of universities are using solutions as a service from various partners and various companies, and sometimes the solutions are paid on a per user basis. You have to pay the licenses, and a goal always is to manage the licenses in a really efficient way, meaning that only people entitled to get a license should get one, and otherwise, when a person is no longer entitled to use a license, immediately deprovision, and ideally do all of this in an automated way. Yeah, what we are realizing for some services like Zoom, and especially for universities, in principle, a lot of people are entitled to get a license. It's either all employees or all staff that is teaching and giving some classes that you need them to have an access to a license when they need to, but maybe even half of them will never use the license. So our question was how to manage this efficiently to deliver the license to everyone who is actually needing it, but don't waste the amount of the license at all. So we come up with the idea of a demo when we can use just-in-time provisioning, which is supported by Zoom, to assign licenses to only people who actually need it, but on the same time maintain a role with entitled users who are the only one who can get the license, and when they are not anymore a member of this role, the license will be automatically deprovisioned. So this demo will show exactly like that, how it works from different point of view. We will show it how it works by the user who's actually using the Zoom, and also we will explain what happens automatically behind the scene. And now I pass the word to my colleague Didra, who will explain the technical details of the demo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deidre from Cirrus Identity. As Slavik mentioned, this demo that you're about to see is a collaborative effort of three InCommon Catalyst partners. InCommon is the Identity Federation for Higher Education and Research in the United States, and they have a Catalyst program for vendors who work in the community and are really knowledgeable about higher education identity management. Working together, we put together this demo. So I would like to describe the key components of this demo. First of all, we have a pretend university, which we call the Athena Institute. And so everything you see will be assuming that you have Zoom admins and MidPoint admins and a user at the Athena Institute. Through the kindness and the generosity of Zoom and the Internet 2 providers through the Net Plus program, we have a Zoom sandbox, which is single sign-on enabled, that will show the user provisioning, deprovisioning in this demo. You'll also be seeing the Cirrus Identity proxy and discovery service. Cirrus Identity offers a bunch of authentication solutions for higher education. We'll be leveraging Evolveum's MidPoint product for managing user authorization and also their connector framework. The connector itself was built via ProvisionIAM's connector service. And you'll see that service provisioning and deprovisioning users and also integrating with MidPoint to display users that have a licensed account in Zoom. Next slide. So in this basic flow, we're going to have a few different players. First of all, we're going to have Ted Thunder. Ted is going to start off as an alumni, and Ted is going to be played by Gary Wyndham, one of our engineers here at Cirrus Identity. And so Ted is going to attempt to authenticate to get into Zoom, but as an alumni, he won't be authorized. And you'll see how the Cirrus proxy does a validation check against Evolveum's MidPoint to see if Ted, our pretend user, is actually eligible for a just-in-time provisioned Zoom account. And I'll play the role of Zoom admin and log into Zoom and show you how the license count in Zoom changes as we do this demo. In our hypothetical story, Ted is going to go back to graduate school. And as a graduate student, he will move from the non-entitled Zoom user to an entitled Zoom account user. And you'll see how when he logs in as a student, Cirrus Identity will check MidPoint and see that he is entitled, and he will be just in time provisioned into Zoom. Then we will fast forward in time, and Ted will graduate from his program and go back to being an alum, where he's no longer licensed for Zoom or eligible, entitled for a Zoom license. And Slavic, as the MidPoint admin, will go in and move him into the alumni group, and you will see a variety of things where he's moved out of the entitled group in Zoom, in MidPoint, and then also automatically deprovisioned from Zoom via the ProvisionIAM connector. And Stefan from ProvisionIAM will describe what's happening behind the scenes, both to deprovision him and also to update MidPoint's list of entitled users. And now we're going to move into the live demo portion. And for that, I am going to play the role of the Zoom admin, which is where we're going to start. So right now I'm logged in to Zoom at the Athena Institute as an administrator, and I'm going to head on over here to user management. And you will see when I click on users that there's currently only one user in this Zoom instance, and that's me, the manager for this instance. Now we're going to switch over and show you the flow where Ted Thunder, our test user, initially tries to log in and is denied, and then later logs in as an entitled user and is provisioned. I'll hand the screen share back over to Slavic to show where we start in MidPoint.
Now I'm sharing screen of the MidPoint user interface. I'm signed in as an admin, so I have full access to the system. So first I will list all the users. And you can see we have several users already created for the demo, but for this instance, we will focus only on Ted Thunder. So I can check all his assignments, meaning all the roles that Ted has. And we have two roles. First one is the alumni that I described. This is when he starts. And the alumni role doesn't grant access to anything, including Zoom. So the Ted is not entitled to Zoom access Zoom at all. And then we have end user role, which is standard role in MidPoint for all the users. It's not relevant for this demo. So, and I can also show the dashboard for Zoom licenses. This dashboard was specially configured for this demo. And we can see we have two entitled users to use Zoom. Currently is Didra's account and myself. And you can see that that is not there. And I can get back to the dashboard and see how many active licenses we have at the moment. And it's only one is Didra's. So that is not there at all. And now I will pass the word to Gary, who will show us the flow from the Ted's perspective, what happened when he tries to use Zoom.
Okay, so now Ted Thunder is going to log into the Athena Institute Zoom instance. Click the Zoom sign in button. And Deidre, do you want to discuss the Cirrus discovery screen here?
Absolutely. So right now, what you're seeing is the discovery service on the Cirrus proxy, and you can see we have a variety of identity providers on this list. The first is the Athena Institute. That's the actual single sign-on identity provider for the Athena Institute. We also have the Athena Institute guest account, which is an org-branded ID service for guest accounts that's offered by Cirrus Identity. And then you also see a few social login options. And that Cirrus Identity provides a gateway service for social login integration. But for this demo, all of our users, Ted Thunder is always going to be using his enterprise account, the Athena Institute. And so he will go ahead and Ted's going to go ahead and choose the Athena Institute. He will be logging in via what's called the Cirrus Bridge. This is a product that allows you to integrate things like Azure Active Directory and Okta to the InCommon and EduGain federations.
So we're logging in as Ted Thunder here.
And what you see right now is that Ted is denied access to Zoom just-in-time provisioning. Now, keep in mind that currently Ted is in the alumni group, which is not entitled to a Zoom license.
Okay, so we are back in the MidPoint interface. I'm still acting as admin of MidPoint. And now we will switch that from alumni to student, which will entitle him to access Zoom. And in a normal scenario, this will happen completely automatically because MidPoint can be connected to the student information system and just obtain this information and do everything automatically behind the scene. But for the purpose of this demo, we will just do this step manually. So I will open all the assignments that Ted has, and I will remove the alumni role, and I will add student role. I will save the changes. And now what happened is that the student role contains another role which entitles Ted to use Zoom. So I still have Ted Thunder open. You can see the student role here, and he has now entitled to get the Zoom account. But this means he's only entitled. He doesn't have a Zoom account yet. And I can confirm it by looking into our dashboard that we still have only one use license, as this was before. But before we had 2 entitled users, and now we have 3 entitled users, including that. So now that can sign into Zoom and actually get the license and can start using the Zoom. So Gary, please, can you show the next part?
Certainly. Let me share the browser again. And so we'll log back in as Ted Thunder to Zoom.
And what you'll see in this part of the demo, when Gary logs in with his SSO, when Ted logs in with his SSO, you'll see that he actually gets just-in-time provision into Zoom. And that's because the Cirrus proxy is checking that Zoom entitled users group or role in MidPoint and identifying that Ted is entitled and passing him through to Zoom for just-in-time provisioning. And when you land in Zoom for the first time, entitled for just-in-time provisioning, you go through a few screens to set up your account, and that's what Ted will be doing now.
Okay, so now we see that the Ted Thunder's email account has received a email from Zoom with an activation link. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And that'll tell us to activate our account, and we'll use SSO. And that'll take us back into the Cirrus proxy to authenticate with the same account we used previously. So we'll do that. And now we can see that we are fully logged into Zoom as Ted Thunder.
Now I'm back into the Zoom user admin interface, and I'm going to refresh the screen. And you will see that Ted Thunder is now a licensed user. And there you see Ted Thunder is now a licensed user within Zoom. And now I'll hand it back over to Slavik so he can show you what you see in the MidPoint interface.
We are now back into MidPoint user interface, and I will start with explaining what happened on the background during the previous flow. So MidPoint has a periodic task which is using the connector developed by ProvisionIAM, and the connector is just providing an interface so the MidPoint can communicate with Zoom. MidPoint is checking all the accounts there, and if there is a new account, MidPoint will try to link it to an existing user, And as part of this linking, MidPoint understands that the user is actually consuming the license. And I will show it on the dashboard. And if you remember, we had before one active user, only one user consuming the license, and 3 entitled users. That was one of them. So now when I open the dashboard, we should see we have 2 active licenses and still 3 entitled users. And if I open the use licenses, that will be one of the users there. And I can also examine Ted's account. And what we will see that Ted has now 1 extra role telling us that Ted is actually consuming the license, which is here, Zoom account active. Also, the connector is not there to only check the existence of the account, but the connector can be also used to synchronize the attribute values. For this demo, we have read the Zoom user ID and store it within the MidPoint. So in case you need this ID for integration of Zoom with any other application, MidPoint is able to provision this ID. Also, it's possible to use the connector to store or read any other attributes. For example, we could set up MidPoint to update name or email, but it's not part of this demo. So with that, we can conclude the provisioning part of the demo. That is there, and it was really easy for him. We spent most of the time explaining what is happening on the background. And now we will switch to the deprovisioning flow. So what I will do now, we will fast forward in time in our demo, and let's say Ted is going to graduate. So I will remove the student role and add the alumni role. This is something that, again, in the real world scenario will happen completely automatically thanks to integration with student information system. MidPoint will just read this change and do everything that I'm doing now manually. It will happen automatically, but for the purpose of this demo, we will just show all the steps in a manual way. So now I'm removing the student role and adding back the alumni role. And I can preview the changes and show you what will happen. So instead of obviously removing and adding the new role, MidPoint will remove the stored Zoom user ID. It's configured in that way, and there's no reason for us to store it anymore. And also it will delete the Zoom account. When I press save, MidPoint will start executing these changes, and it will again happen through the connector developed by ProvisionIAM. And MidPoint will just tell the connector to call the proper API to remove the account. So I will save it now. So now MidPoint through the connector is removing the account. And it will also remove Ted from the entitled users, so he's not authorized to sign to Zoom anymore. And we can check the result on our dashboard again. And we used to have 2 active licenses and 3 entitled users. Now, because that is no longer entitled and this was the provision, so it's not using the license, we are back when we started to only 1 active users and 2 entitled users. And now I will ask Didra to show us the Zoom admin console to prove that that was actually removed from the Zoom.
Now I'm coming back in as a Zoom admin, and I'm going to refresh my screen. And you will see that Ted is no longer present as a licensed user through the automated deprovisioning from MidPoint via the ProvisionIAM connector. And now I'm going to turn it over to Stefan, who's going to describe what ProvisionIAM connector did to deprovision and to present Ted as a licensed user in MidPoint. Stefan?
Hi, I'm Stefan Fox with ProvisionIAM, and we're going to talk now about what the ProvisionIAM connector did. The ProvisionIAM connector we demonstrated today is based on an open source framework we call the ProvisionIAM based connector. This framework was used to simplify and accelerate the development of MidPoint resource connectors and allow organizations to integrate with other systems. ProvisionIAM has developed a substantial library of MidPoint resource connectors using this base connector framework. And if you want to find out more information about the framework, we have that URL below, GitHub/labs. Just a little bit more about the MidPoint base connector, the ProvisionIAM base connector framework is actually built upon resources that use a ConID framework. And that is the framework that MidPoint typically uses to connect to external systems. What we've done in ProvisionIAM is that we've created an abstraction layer that allows you to accelerate your development and making it much simpler. We have some of the components. Here is the configuration helper, which allows you to use a YAML file to quickly construct a configuration page that you would typically see in the MidPoint resource configuration wizard. The connector framework also has built-in authentication. We support a number of different methods, such as basic authentication, JWT, and AAuth 2. So you have a lot of different options that will allow you also not to have to recreate the wheel every single time you want to create a new connector. On the third page of the resource wizard, MidPoint allows you to describe the schema of each object type that you'll be working with. And we also have an adapter that allows you to specify what the schema would look like. The ProvisionIAM base connector also has a driver which manages CRUD operations, create, update, read, delete. And in order to work with the CRUD operations, we allow you to define what we call an endpoint service data model, which is really just a basic, simple Java class, what they call POJOs. We also integrate with it what we call an invocator, which allows you to interface directly with the service endpoints that you work with. And in addition, we have built-in RESTful support, which really just allows you to specify the endpoint URL and provide the service data model object, and the provision base connector framework will do all of that work for you. So I think that this is an open source framework that you can use to build your own connectors.
What you just saw was the demo of how to efficiently manage Zoom licenses. But what is important to say here, even though we are decided to demonstrate this on Zoom, which is a service that most of you know, the principle that we show is completely universal and it can be used for any service, cloud or on-premise. You can use it for any service where you need to manage accounts or licenses or any additional information and use exactly the same principle, or just customize it only using the configuration. What is also important here, that the demo was really simple. We want to keep it short and effective, demonstrate this basic principle, but in the practice, you can extend it with any other features offered by all the components that we demonstrated. It can be, for example, combined by account linking feature of the Cyrus proxy. You can set up some configurations from MidPoint, for example, informing you when you are reaching the critical number of licenses that you need to buy new pack of licenses. You can use more features from the connector, for example, configure the connector not only read information from Zoom and deprovision account, but to also update attributes of existing account to be sure that, for example, names and emails are always up to date in the Zoom for the active users. Or you can even complicate the whole life cycle with a simple alumni becoming a student and back to alumni. You can combine it with the user becoming also an employee and maybe getting some additional rights, and so on and so on and so on. What is also important to say here, that what we demonstrate was mostly what is happening behind the scene. From the user perspective, it was really simple. User tries to authenticate to Zoom service, and either he's authorized and he can get in, or he's not authorized. When he's not authorized, there's nothing the user can do. But again, in the real world example, we can inform the user what happened and what he can do about it. And if the user was able to sign in, he can immediately start using the service without any obstacles. The main message of our demo was then, if you have the integrated identity management solution, access management solution, and connectors to integrate with all your systems, you have this baseline for your identity and access management, which you can use to accomplish similar things that we show in the demo, and you can easily extend it to support any other use cases. Thank you for your attention, and if you want to learn more about the companies or about the components that was presented in this demo, please use the contact information that you can see on this slide.